So first I want to start with an introduction. My name is Sarah Goski. On my start screen, there was links to my various social media. I'm not huge on social media. Probably the biggest one is Instagram, where I try to post somewhat regularly on there. But the key to my Instagram is really that everything that I teach here, I have samples of a lot of that stuff on Instagram. I also have samples of my own artwork. I am a fiber artist, which means that I work with um, uh, fibers, textiles, fabric. I do fabric collage, weaving, felting, um, dyeing. I actually just recently did a shibori dyeing workshop with indigo. That was pretty cool. So, yeah, fiber artist. I also am a teacher. I've been teaching since I was 13 years old, which was a very long time ago. But I started teaching piano at 13, and I have taught a lot of different subjects, but mostly I teach art now. And I'm also what's called an instructional designer. I'm in instructional technology. My focus is online education, and that is part of why I'm doing this stream, because I feel like online education really is the future, and there's already a lot of great stuff out there. That where you can go and learn. In fact, I think Twitch is a great place to learn. But I didn't really see a whole lot of art out there other than Bob Ross, where I was teaching traditional painting and drawing. So that's why I'm here. So let's take a look at the chat real quick and see what's up. Yay! So you've been drawing since then. That is the best thing to do. Is, I actually have a little motto, and a couple of my art teachers disagree with me on this, but I feel like art is just a skill you don't have yet. That there's no such thing as someone who can't draw or can't paint, because frankly, it's a skill just like anything else. I mean, unless you physically can't do it for some reason, anybody can learn how to do these things. So that's another reason why I'm doing this on Twitch rather than some website where you have to pay to get on, because I want it to be accessible to everyone. I think art it's something anyone can do and feel good about themselves and being creative. So the best thing to do is just practice. Just draw. Like if you like drawing or you like painting, just do it over and over and over again, and you're going to get better. That's just how that works. So awesome. I'm so glad you've been drawing this whole time. So my major in art was fiber arts. Technically, it was textile design was the name of my major. That's what it says on my degree, but it's fiber arts because we focused more on the art of it than the design. Now, I also happen to do graphic design, and if you check out my website, which is goskidesign.com, you can see some of my graphic designs aren't really all that great, I would say. I mean, in fact, a lot of the ones that are really good, I have NDAs on, so I can't put that stuff out there yet. So the stuff that I have that I'm able to put out there is things that I've like done for my mom or my sister or something like that. So, but it still shows what I love to work on. I really like Photoshop editing, and I'm quite good at that. So, and you can see some of the cool stuff I've done over the years. You just needed to draw a ton and not worry about how it looks. Yeah, exactly. I mean, because that's the thing is I have a lot of younger students in real life. I guess for purposes of this stream, I will call it, oh man, thanks, Philip. I appreciate that. I'm going to call it in instructional technology, we call face-to-face the IRL stuff. Like when I'm actually teaching in person, that's face-to-face, and then this would be online instruction. So that's how I'm going to keep those, because this is live too. So I can't refer to one as live instruction because they're both live instruction. So my face-to-face classes, I have a lot of students that are young, like 7 years old, 8 years old. And you can actually see, I just recently posted an Instagram In fact, I think it was earlier today because I was trying to get everyone to come out here and watch my stream. And I posted several pictures of different students' work, and you can see some of them are quite good, even though they are very young. And a lot of it's practice, but some of it is just the type of instruction that I do. I follow a plan. I don't know if you guys have heard of a company called Grumbacher. They do probably what they're most famous for is their Academy art, like Academy paints, like their oils and watercolors. Here, let's see if I can show you the logo so you can see. So, okay, ooh, man, that is blurry. But anyway, you get the gist. You see the logo at least, Academy. So Grumbacher is, that's the company that writes the lesson plans that I use. Some of them are great. Some of them are so-so, and I have to kind of fill in the blanks. But either way, it's designed to be a 2-hour class. And I'll talk a little bit more about the structure of my classes later. But basically, it's a little like if you've ever gone to, I don't know how old some of you guys are, but if you've ever gone to like a wine and design type thing, you go, you start, you kind of follow step by step, and then by the end of the 2 hours, you have a finished painting. So it's a little like that without the wine, although I have the wine. So, if you're over 21, you're welcome to get your own wine and enjoy. At least in this country. I don't know what the laws are in other countries, so maybe you can drink younger. But basically, I add a little bit more art to my instruction, art history. A lot of times, like when we're mixing colors, I talk about color theory. And so I try to make it more of an art lesson rather than just doing a painting or doing a drawing. Like I want you to actually learn things like perspective, stuff like that. So I will be adding that into my lessons. So I have been teaching the face-to-face classes for almost 3 years now. Oh, right. That's true. That's true. Philip just said something about champagne, and you're right. A lot of people may be doing champagne to ring in the new year. The Roaring 20s, y'all. Speaking of y'all, since I said that, I am originally from Charleston, South Carolina, which is in the South in the United States. And many of us do have accents, and we say fun things like y'all. I don't have a super strong Southern accent because my parents are from the Midwest. And in fact, when I get really heated about things, I start getting very nasal, like Chicago. Oh my God. So, yeah, but I will say y'all. I also say you guys. I say dudes, and I will use those to refer to both men and women. So if I say guys, it is a general term, and I mean it that way. So that's important for you to know, because I know today gender is a very touchy issue, and I don't want to offend anyone, but I just want you to know ahead of time my meaning. All right. One more thing I want to mention. I've got a little list here of things I want to make sure I cover. I will have some kids watching this because I have some of my previous students that even though I don't live in their area, they can now log on and probably under their parents' name and watch me live. So I'm going to try to keep it as clean as possible. Hopefully everybody's respectful in chat and keeps it relatively clean. I mean, I'm not going to be too strict about it, but just keep in mind that you may very well have like a 9 or 10-year-old on here, potentially disguised as their parent. Okay. Well, if anybody has any questions about me, now is the time to ask, because I'm getting ready to launch into the supplies that you'll need for future lessons. And just so you know, I do want to make it clear that tonight, I won't be doing any actual drawing or painting lessons tonight. And the reason is first of all, I know you guys want to get out there and have a good time. I'm stuck here at the house. I'm taking care of a sweet kitty for a friend of mine. And so I'm not going out, but I don't want this to be too long so that you guys can enjoy your New Year's Eve. But my next stream will be a live lesson. So no worries. It's just this one, I just want to introduce myself and the supplies that you'll need. Okay? If there aren't any questions, I will start. I'm going to start with a kitty. Yes, his name is Arugula, and he is a sweet boy. All right. Okay, so first things first with drawing. Very basic. If you have a pencil and paper, you can draw with me. I do have this fancy art set. It's by Grumbacher. It says Gioconda, but it's actually Koh-I-Noor, which is a famous diamond. So they're supposed to be, you know, hard pencils. But let me open this and show you what this looks like. But this is the same company as Grumbacher. So hopefully these stay in. But so the way these are set up is you have all of these stick form and then pencil form of the exact same colors. So you have graphite, lead, and then chalk. Also, you have a spreader. That's what this is for. And I talk more about it in the actual lessons. But that's a spreader. This here is an eraser. And so I have a little rule. So some of you, or hopefully all of you, know who Bob Ross is. And Bob Ross always talks about happy accidents. I'm a firm believer in happy accidents. I feel like most of what we do in life is derivative in some way. You know, we got the idea from somebody else, or at the very least, you know, everything your parents and your culture have taught you have led you to that idea. So nothing you do is really original in a lot of ways. So the way to be original is when you collaborate with the universe. In other words, when you make a mistake. So your mistakes really are your way of being unique. So I really encourage my students. In fact, the only time I do have an eraser as part of the supplies, but I encourage my students to only use this for techniques like highlighting. Like maybe if I was doing this line of light right here that you can see on my nose, you know, then you would actually use an eraser to erase that out after you smudged charcoal on there. So it's a technique. I'm not erasing a mistake. So I try to encourage everyone to use their mistakes. Quick question, somebody asked if I have a gallery. I do. So you can check out my Instagram, which is sgoski, Goski, sgoski, or you can check out my website, which is goskidesign.com. So great question. Oh, Philip already took care of it. Man, Philip, you are so on top of it. Thank you, buddy. You're awesome. Okay, so a little bit more about this. Like I said, if you don't have these, so what this is for is that you can get tones. And I'll show you guys an example. I do actually have some examples of my work. So here's an example of a work that I did. And you see, this is a class I taught. And you can see that there's browns and reds in it. Well, you can't get that from a number 2 pencil. So that's where these colors come into play. However, you absolutely don't need it. I mean, you could still do this entire picture and it would look just as great with just a number 2 pencil. So you don't have to have anything fancy. If you're curious as to where I got this, you can either order it directly from Chartpak, CHARTPAK, Chartpak. I can also put this in the notes or like the description. I'll put all that information there. But you can either get it from there, or I got my stuff from Michael's because I work there. So I teach at Michael's as well. So I like art. But anyway, you can get them at Michael's. And I always recommend waiting for, Michael's does like 40% off if you go to their website. So you can get this set for 40% off. I think it's originally like $32 and you can get that 40% off. So. But here's your number 2 pencil. Now, you can go to the store and get a fancy pencil like this. This is called an HB, and that's usually up here. You've got the little gold marker there. That says HB. HB and number 2 pencil are literally the exact same thing. So you can buy your $1.49 pencil or you can get your 20-cent pencil. You choose. I do use this in watercolor, so, but I bought the fancy art pencils. They are a little higher quality, so you are getting a little bit higher quality. You know how sometimes like the lead will pop out of these or things like that. That doesn't happen in these as much. So it is worth the $1.50, but you don't have to spend that to get the exact same thing. Okay, so the next thing you'll need is you will need some kind of drawing paper. Now, I always recommend all of my classes uses the size 9 by 12. You do not have to use that size, but I highly recommend 9 by 12. Again, you can get these at Michael's. You could probably order these on Amazon, though. This is Strathmore, which is a famous brand, so it's a big brand. I like to keep everything in the book, as you can see with this that I was showing you. Like, it's really nice to be able to keep things, oops, sorry. Keep things in the book. Oh, this is sideways. Wrong way. So you can see. This was a fun one we did. One of my younger students really loves unicorns, so we did that. This is very light. You cannot see this very well. Nope, still can't see it. The lighting is not so great there, but this was a sketch of a place in downtown Charleston. So you can see that it's nice to keep it in the book because then you keep having it. And I'll show you guys some more samples later. But I recommend this. However, again, if you just have some printer paper at home, that's not a problem. And in fact, what is printer paper, 8.5 by 11? That's fine. And you can actually do the dimensions are very similar. So you can still do everything on an 8.5 by 11. So that's that. Sharpener. I just have this cheap sharpener. I think maybe this is from Dollar Tree. I don't know in other countries if Dollar Tree exists. Might be in Canada, but it must be in Canada. Everything's in French too, so I'm sure that it's up there. But yeah, just a basic pencil sharpener. In fact, I actually recommend makeup pencil sharpeners. So if there's a makeup store like Ulta, like a beauty supply store, Sally's, something like that, they're pretty inexpensive. Like you can usually get them maybe 59 cents or so. And they're usually very high quality because they're made for makeup pencils, which are, have wax and things like that. So a little trick. Like I said before, a really good eraser. And you want a good one. Let me see, I actually have another. So here's another example of a different kind of eraser that you can get. Either way, the one that comes in the kit, the Gioconda kit, is a gum eraser. And all that it's needed, that just means that you can break off a piece of it if you want, or you can mold it into like a point. Like say you wanted to do something really tiny, you can mold it into a point. So that's what that's for. All right, so I think that's it for drawing. So now I'm going to talk about, does anybody have any questions before I move on to acrylic painting? Anybody have questions about the drawing supplies? Meanwhile, I'm going to take a sip of wine while you guys think about that. And balance it with water. Okay, no questions. Love it. All right. So, all right. Here's the thing about my painting classes. I try to make it as economical as possible for you. So I use the same 5 colors every time. I also use the same brushes between acrylic and watercolor. So you could buy the 5 watercolor paints, the 5 acrylic paints, watercolor paper, and some canvases, and you're good to go. So I try to make it, like I said, I mean, I'm used to teaching kids, and it's difficult sometimes to invest in kids' hobbies because kids change their minds so frequently. So, and they grow out of things very quickly. So I try to make it as cheap for the parents as possible. All right, first things first, you need something to put your paints on. So I use either palette paper. I really like palette paper because it gives you more space to mix your paints on. However, it's not so great for the environment. So you can, sometimes I can reuse the paints if you cover it with plastic and put it in the freezer. Believe it or not, that works. But I pretty much throw these away once they're done. So this, I've been trying to live up to my principles and not use palette paper very often because it is wasteful. The other alternative is an actual palette. And now Bob Ross uses like the huge, his is probably masonite palette, but you can get wood as well. Those are pretty good too, and they can be reused. Now he uses oil paints, and we'll be using acrylic, which dry much faster, so they're harder to clean off once they're dry. Oil paints, if you use mineral spirits or terpenoid or something, you can clean them off pretty much any time. But acrylic paints, once they're dry, it's hard. I mean, you just have to scrape it. It's just elbow grease. But like I said, these are pretty inexpensive, reusable. You can buy them from Michael's, Hobby Lobby. Let's see, what are some other ones? I think AC Moore is closing now, so no, none of that. You can also use a plate. Like if you have, Corel makes really nice, just big white open plates, and those are really good. I would definitely, if you are younger, ask mom first before you start putting paint on plates. I mean, it will wash off, but that's something, you know, you should definitely ask about. Okay, you need something to mix your paints. So this is a plastic palette knife. You can also use, I didn't bring, sorry, I wanted to check, but I didn't bring any of my metal palette knives to my friend's house. I have a ton of those, but this is a plastic one. I like these, and I like the ones that are really long, like this. What is this? I think this may be like 2 or 3 inches. Anyway, those are really good. But you can also use a plastic knife. I like to reuse things. So I think this came in a set of like a fork and knife from somewhere, who knows. And I used the fork and didn't use the knife. So I took the knife and I use it as a palette knife. Big into reusing things. Let's see. And in fact, I have my wine here, but you also need something to put your water in when you're doing acrylic paints. So you can use like a jar, but I also encourage you to reuse containers like an old yogurt container or something like that, because you know, there's no sense in throwing it away if you can reuse it to mix your paint, to clean your brushes. All right. Speaking of brushes, okay. My computer keeps giving me high CPU warnings. Thank you, computer. All right, so you need a wash brush. Now, this is the Grumbacher brush. Let's see, it's a Goldenedge. These are a little bit more expensive, but it is worth it because the more expensive brushes, the bristles don't pull out, and you can tell because you just kind of tug on them and shake them around, and they won't come out. This is a less expensive brush. I think this brush was maybe $1.99, something like that, whereas this one's like $18. Everything's American dollars, by the way. I'm sure you figured that out, but just so to be clear. If you are interested in painting and you know you're going to be interested in the future, it is a good idea to recommend to get one of these. Like I said, Michael's does discounts all the time. 40% off is their normal every day on their app or website discount. So you can get these, unless they're on sale, you can get them with that. But these, like I said, you can also get by with these. And I've been using this. I've used these in several classes, face-to-face classes, and they're still fine. like for a good year or so. So, I mean, it's not like they're forever. But all right, different kinds of brushes. So these are flat, but they're also called Filbert because they have these round, the rounded edge. Grumbacher calls theirs a wash brush. Everybody else on the planet calls theirs a Filbert. So, you know, you decide. But this is a 3/4 wash brush. This is, let's see, a size 10 Filbert. The size has to do with the diameter. I want to say it's millimeters because, you know, everybody accept us as metric. So that's fun. The next brush, you only need 2 brushes. So this is for like your large areas. This is for your finer points. Now, this is a size 6 round brush. Round just means that it's round, not flat, but it has a point on it. This, the cheaper one, oh, I can't even read that. It got washed off. But I think these are size 6 and size 8. And the reason I did that is because Grumbacher has weird off sizes sometimes. Their brushes are very high quality, but they're, I don't know, they like to be original. So no problem, but just keep in mind that the size 6 in a Grumbacher brush is kind of in the middle between a size 6 and a size 8 in everybody else. So I got both, you know, for funsies. So those are the brushes. Now, just to make a note, in watercolor, you will use these exact same brushes. So no need to buy more than one. Acrylic, for all intents and purposes, they're both water-based, so you can use them interchangeably as long as you clean your brushes well. Okay, so I talked about palette paper and palettes, palette knife, paints, haha. Okay. So, oh, about how long will one of those brushes last you? Good question. All right, so if you're talking about these brushes, this can last you the rest of your life, as long as you clean it well. And I talk about that in my classes, so you don't have to worry. Every single class, I will talk about brush cleanliness and how to do it correctly, because it's super important for the life of your brush. But so these will last you, like I said, a lifetime. I have an oil painting teacher who has Grumbacher brushes that she's had for, I think, 50 years, a long time. These, not as long, you know, I mean, they're $1.99 or something like that. So they're not going to last a long time, but I mean, they've lasted a year and they've been fine. And that was, I mean, up until September, I was teaching classes weekly, sometimes twice a week, using these brushes. So, I mean, that's pretty good. They'll still last a long time. It all comes down to how you take care of your stuff. It's kind of like clothes. I mean, I've got clothes that I had in high school, which I'm going to tell you was over 20 years ago for me. So, but you know, if you take care of your stuff, it lasts a lot longer. Great question though. Okay, so the colors I use, you've got your 3 primary colors, red, blue, and yellow. Now, oops, I know I keep talking about Grumbacher, but you say, Sarah, why are those Liquitex? That's a really good question. That is because the way these, basically it's the design of the tube. I like the design of Liquitex tubes better. When they open, it's a really broad opening versus Grumbacher. I don't have any Grumbacher paints on me, I don't think, but I can show you with the watercolor. It's got these tiny, it's the same with the acrylic, they're just bigger tubes. But it's got this tiny little neck, and what happens is if it gets dry, you pull, and it actually pulls the entire cap apart and breaks the cap. And I've had that happen so many times, and I've had so many dried out paints because of the design of their tube. I have written the company multiple times telling them they need to change the design of the tube, and they have not to date. So, you know, I would say that my voice doesn't count, but you never know. Maybe it just hasn't gotten to the right person yet, right? So meanwhile, I use Liquitex because I like the design of their tubes, and their paint's actually pretty good quality. Grumbacher paint is excellent quality, and um, what's important to note here is that these are not exact color matches to the original lesson plan, because all of my lesson plans are written with Grumbacher colors. Like the paintbrush sizes, Grumbacher likes to name their stuff colors that doesn't exist anywhere else. They have, like Grumbacher red. What does that mean? Who knows? So I have picked the closest colors, and I've got, this is called naphthol crimson. Naphthol crimson. And again, I will make sure that this is all in the description. So you'll have this, but naphthol crimson. Your yellow is a cadmium yellow medium. Now, if you see something that says the word hue, H-U-E, cadmium yellow hue, what that means is that it's the color of cadmium yellow, but it has no actual cadmium in it, because cadmium is a heavy metal. It is poisonous, and so it's not as toxic in acrylic paints, so you don't have to worry about it too much because it's water soluble. But oil paints is particularly a problem because it mixes with the oils in our skin, and it actually can penetrate our skin. So if you've ever heard of an art student going to the hospital because they had heavy metal poisoning, it's because they were using real metal paints. Cobalt is a metal, cadmium is a metal, titanium white, that's a metal. Speaking of titanium white, that's the white that you need to use. So this doesn't actually have titanium in it, so it's fine. And I think titanium is one of the less toxic metals anyway, but I say that, I could be 100% wrong, so don't even quote me on that. But I will say that acrylic paints, I know for a fact, acrylic paints are not, I'm not going to say they're completely harmless, like, don't, stick it in your mouth and eat it or anything weird like that, because that's not good. Don't lick your fingers or anything. Some artists actually do that, or they'll, lick their brush before they, it happens. But anyway, so don't do that. But anyway, it's not going to hurt you just through your fingers. Okay, so titanium white, cadmium yellow medium. There is cadmium yellow light. You want medium. Okay, this is phthalocyanine blue, also known as phthalo blue. So this is a favorite of Bob Ross. We actually talked about this earlier in my test stream. But phthalo blue is, it's a really good, cool blue. And I talk about temperature of colors in as part of color theory in my classes. So if you take a painting class with me, you will learn about the warm and the cool of things. Okay, this is burnt umber brown. And so basically what we have here, you have white and brown, and then you have your three primary colors. You can mix every single color from these 5 colors. That is why I only use these 5 colors. Everything, including black, because black, I'm going to go ahead and give you a hint now, because this is a lesson that I usually teach. Back in the day, there wasn't black. We used, there's lamp black that uses the soot from lamps, carbon black that uses charcoal, the soot from like carbon-based burnt forms. And but those didn't come until the Industrial Revolution. So prior to that, you did not really have black, or it was very rare. And black isn't really seen very much in nature. Everything you see in nature is dark brown. So how do you get that, you ask? Or maybe you didn't, but I'm going to tell you anyway. You mix red and blue, which makes, does anybody know? Yeah, hopefully, purple. Red and blue and brown. And that gives you black. It gives you a really, really pretty rich black too. Imagine like, I'm trying to think, like Asian hair. You see a lot of times, like Indian or or Chinese or Japanese or something like that, you see their hair looks black and it's not. It's actually very, very, very dark brown. Beautiful color. That's what you get. Okay, so a canvas, again, 9 by 12. Everything is 9 by 12. You can use a canvas, or you can use, if you decide that you want to frame something, these have like a lip in the back, so you can just hang it on the wall. And these are not gallery wrapped, which means that they're just stapled in the back. Gallery wrap means it's stapled on the side, so these staples would not be showing. So these are inexpensive. You can buy 10 packs of them, which is what I do. But you can also buy the flat boards, which can be framed easier. So those work too. Now, so I mentioned earlier the cup for water. You can also use something called a matte medium. And this is basically just, it's a way of, it makes your paints last longer. So acrylic dries pretty quickly, but if you mix a little bit of matte medium with it, it will keep it from drying, but it doesn't make it shiny by like adding oil or anything like that. So you've got matte medium, but this acts just like water. It thins it. And then last but not least, you can decide, I like to do my paintings like directly on the table. Like I just sit there and paint like on the table. I also have easels, especially for when I do bigger stuff, but since we're just doing 9 by 12, you kind of don't need an easel for that. But I do have these little tabletop easels that I use in my classes for students who want to use that. Especially I have students who, some of my older students, like I've got some retirees that like to take my classes, and they have trouble painting straight down. So they prefer to have it up on this. So these are very, very inexpensive. I don't even remember how much I paid, maybe like $3 or something. They're not very expensive. And a lot of times you can find stuff like this on sale. So that's if you want to do that. Like I said, if you don't need to for any reason, I recommend just putting paper down like newsprint or something like that and just painting directly on your table, because it's a lot easier to get very fine points. Otherwise, you're having to use your pinky to rest on the canvas, or you're having to like set your elbows somewhere so you can get a fine point. It's very difficult. Okay, that is it for acrylic paint. The next step is watercolor. So does anybody have questions about acrylic paints? You guys are very quiet, which is cool because it's letting me just do my thing and talk, but it's a little nerve-wracking. So no questions. Okay, real quick, again, I'm just going to go through the colors. Any yellow is fine. Any blue is fine. Any red is fine. White. I do recommend titanium white, and the reason, there's zinc white and there's another one that I can't remember off the top of my head. But the reason titanium is important is because there's a transparency factor to paints. So titanium white, let's just say it grays your color a little bit. So it muddies the color. So you take something like blue, like phthalo blue is a little bit more transparent, which means you'd have to paint a coat, let it dry, paint another coat, let it dry, and paint another coat to get like a really nice dark color. If you mix a little bit of white in it, this is less transparent. So yes, it's going to be a little bit lighter blue, but it will actually cover in one coat versus 3. The color kittens. I'm not actually sure what that is. What are the color kittens? That sounds fun. Anything involving kittens is probably fun, though. A book. Okay, cool. Is it like a book for kids or? No, I appreciate. Oh, children's book. Okay, cool. Philip, you're totally cool. You've been very supportive, so no worries. I'm just, want to make sure everybody's questions are getting answered. Cool. So, all right, watercolor. Now, like I said, the brushes are exactly the same. You have your size 10. Yeah, I figured that it was my Aunt Debbie. So very cool. I saw the name. Very cool. Thank you. Yeah, I guess as a grandma, you probably know all the kids' books, huh? So, by the way, guys, my Aunt Debbie, we're doppelgangers. So, I frequently mistake pictures of her for me. So, I have like my twin on the on the stream. Okay, so watercolors, you use the same brushes. You use the same palette. You use the same pencil. And for this, we do use a pencil, and I'll explain in a minute why we use pencils. We don't use pencil with, we don't draw on the canvas. Very, very rarely, if ever. But we do draw on watercolor paper. Watercolor paper. Now, watercolor paper is important because it has a tooth on it. So, the tooth actually helps grab the water and keep it from just going blah everywhere. So there's a smooth side to watercolor paper and a rough side. And the rough side is the side you always want to paint on. Again, 9 by 12. I know I've already said it a bunch of times, but it's the size that I use. Also, I recommend a ruler because every once in a while you'll need a straight line for something. And like I said, we do draw in watercolor. Now, here's why we draw. So acrylic paints are additive, which means, say I paint something red, I let it dry, I can paint over it with blue. It might take a couple coats, but I can paint over it with blue, and I'm not going to get purple because the red paint has dried. I'm going to get blue eventually. Like I said, sometimes you have to paint a couple of coats, but you can paint over things. You cannot do such things in watercolor. Watercolor is completely transparent, and therefore you can't paint over. That being said, it means it requires more planning. Now, here is where I'll give you a little art lesson. So there is a really famous painter, printer named Albrecht Dürer, D-U-R-E-R. I believe he was German. One of my favorite, he was an arrogant SOB, and I love it. He was really, really phenomenal. And he's got this, he's got one of his paintings. It's called A Great Piece of Turf. I think it's A Great Piece of Turf or A Fine Piece of Turf. It's a picture of grass, but it's amazing. And if you look at it, it's watercolor. He did the entire thing that if you look at it, it looks like an acrylic painting. It's so well planned. But if you think about the fact that you have to work light to dark, it just shows you the amount of talent that this guy had probably in his pinky, which is very, very talented. So Albrecht Dürer, if you're interested, D-U-R-E-R. Okay, the colors. You're going to notice some similarities. So these are much smaller because you don't really need very much. Watercolor goes a really long way. And what's cool is once it's dry, like I actually recommend if you're going to take both the watercolor and acrylic classes from me, I recommend getting 2 of these because, and I think a lot of times they come in a 2-pack anyway, but what happens is that say you put a little bit of paint in this, you let it dry, you can actually reactivate it with water. So, large piece of turf. Thank you. You found it. And I believe, didn't you say earlier that you were in Germany? So, pretty cool, right? You know, that's a native there. That's awesome. But yeah, if you put these, so you can reactivate them or reconstitute is what we call it in art. But you can put water. Put water on it and it will soften and actually get color from it. So you can reuse these over and over and over again. You do not need very much. The colors I have, this is a cadmium yellow light. Again, you could use a medium and that would be fine, but light is just because in watercolor, again, you're working light to dark. So you want to start light and you can always mix color in and make it dark. I have two different kinds of blue, a warm and a cool, and you can actually see the difference. This is the cool and this is the warm. And you can see, to me, it's a feeling that you get, right? You know, so this makes me feel like I'm on a beach somewhere, you know, with clear blue skies, right? So it's warm. This is like, you know, the color of Lake Michigan. I'm just saying that because my Aunt Deb lives near Lake Michigan. I don't know, Lake Michigan might be brown for all I know, but it looks cooler for sure. You can see the temperature difference. So this one is ultramarine blue, and this one is, they have it as phthalo blue, but you could also use a cobalt blue and that would be fine. This is phthalo blue. Okay. Yellow, I already talked about. And by the way, it is, in watercolor, it is more important that you get both a warm and a cool. And you can do it with each one, but watercolor is just so, it's hard to describe. I always call watercolor my collaboration with the universe, because once you mix water with it and you've got water all over your paper, you don't really know what's going to happen, and you touch it and you want colors to be able to intermingle. And so if you have blue coming from this side and the exact same blue or the same tone of blue coming from this side, it's not going to be nearly the effect as if you had a warm coming from this side and a cool coming from this side, right? You know, it creates an effect in watercolor that you don't get from anything else because of the way they mix. So I do recommend getting both. This is phthalo crimson, and this is, oh, burnt umber, so the same. Notice I don't have a white, because in watercolor, white is your paper. You know, we just basically don't paint there whenever we want white. Again, why it's really important to plan. So with my watercolor classes, we'll spend the first usually 20 to 30 minutes drawing. Now, some watercolor paintings need less drawing than others, but just light sketches to figure out where exactly you want your lines to go, because like I said, if you need white, you can't go backwards and add white. So, because it would be transparent. Okay, so am I missing anything? I don't think I'm missing anything. I will show you guys a couple of samples. I forgot to bring acrylic samples, but I do have plenty of those on my Instagram and on my website, Goski Design. If you go to workshops and you go to my acrylic workshops, I've got plenty of samples there. But watercolor, so here's a watercolor that we did. This is some nice swans there. This is one of my favorite ones. I've actually done this one a couple of times. This is just like a, you know, a little umbrella on the beach. It's very colorful. I like it. And you can see like the dark lines where basically what I probably did was I put water on this and then let the color dry. And when it dries to the edges. Like it actually dries outward. So you get darker around the edges. But you just get more serendipity with watercolor. And I always put the cheese ball joke out there that I put the Sarah in serendipity. Terrible, I know, it's awful, but you know, I'm corny, it's okay. I love that about myself. Okay, let's see. So I showed you guys a couple. Also, sometimes I will redo classes. So this is to show you, I did this class one day. Also, Paw the Grub, I don't know your real name, but you mentioned earlier about practicing and just putting stuff out there. So this was drawing one, which, you know, so it was my very first time ever doing this particular lesson plan. The next day, I taught the exact same lesson, And this is drawing too. So you can see how I improved because I realized different things that I wanted. Like, oh, I want the face to be broader, and, you know, maybe I want to change the way the wings look over here, you know. So you can really, it really makes a difference. Let's see, I think I have another example in here. Here's a fun one. I try to do theme stuff too. So as we get closer to different holidays, like this one I did around Easter, as we get closer to different holidays, I try to, you know, I try to pick things that go with the season. That's the other difference between my class and like a wine and design type class, or even Bob Ross, is that, well, not really Bob Ross. He's almost exclusively landscapes, but I do still lifes, florals, landscapes, seascapes. I do have anime, steampunk, comic. I can do those with drawing. So, you know, I'm going to try to really test out all of the lesson plans and not just do landscapes. So here's one where I did, this was one day. This was the next day. And I don't know which one I like better, actually, because I feel like there were some things that were serendipitous in this, you know, where I put a line unexpectedly in a certain place. But this one was with practice, so I guess technically it is better. Here's another one. What was happening is I had these two students and they couldn't come on the same day, but they wanted to do the same lessons. So that I was doing these. So here's one. Here's the next day. And this one, I actually had done probably about 2 years before I had done this drawing. So I actually already had a little practice with it. So hopefully you would think it'd be phenomenal. So I don't know. Here's a fun one. This was actually in my anime group. It was the same girl that likes unicorns, also likes mermaids. So I did this one with her. And when I teach things like anime, a lot of times I focus on the technique. I've got a couple, in fact, there's one in here. Let's see if I can find it. Okay, so it's cheesy, but again, I'm teaching technique. So this is anime Harry Potter. I am a huge Harry Potter fan, so we did this. So what we did though is I went through and I had her pick the eyes first, and so I just picked whatever she picked. So these were the eyes she picked. The nose, you can choose a different nose. With anime, it's so expressive. You know, you can have different eyes, different nose, different mouth, different chin, different hair, different body shape, like everything, you know, it's so customizable. And that's like the nature of anime. And comic book, similar. It's similar with that too, is that it's very customizable. So I focus a little bit more on that. Now here's one. I just posted this recently on my Instagram, actually. So this is a portrait, and this is not like my best portrait ever or anything like that. Again, we were focusing on technique. So I was focusing on helping her understand the proportions. Actually, I think this was one of my male students, but we were talking about proportions in the face and things like the glint in the eye. That's what makes your painting look real or your drawing look real. I don't know who this is. This was just a model from the lesson plan, so I'm not really sure. I don't think it's anyone famous. I think it was just whoever wrote the lesson plan. I think it was like their dad or something. So here's some guy. I have no idea. We can call him, we'll call him Phil. Aunt Deb, you can tell cousin Phil I said that. We'll call this Phil. Anyway, so yeah, this was more about the technique, getting things like, you know, wrinkles, getting those correctly. You know, when someone smiles, you get these, you know, like laugh lines in the eyes and in the mouth. And so those are things to keep in mind and to learn. So a lot of my stuff with drawing has to do with technique. I'm going to see if I have one in here because I had one on perspective. Let's see. Ooh, this is another favorite one. This was, I feel like maybe after a Thomas Cole, but it's the Sierra Nevadas. I love landscapes a lot. I guess I don't have it in here. Oh, no, I did. So here's one. This was not an actual finished painting, but occasionally I'll kind of go off topic, and I'll teach something like this. I was teaching 2-point perspective, where you draw a line this way and this way and this way. This is hard to do mirrored, and you can. And that's how you can draw a building. It's really funny because, so I've been watching this stream. Some of you guys are on the stream with me when we watch John do his stream. So I actually, this building, the original Sokoban, I don't know if any of you guys have ever played that or remember the beginning where the guy, like you start at this building at night. And I was always inspired by that. I have a watercolor somewhere where I did a perspective drawing like that. And Sokoban actually used to be one of my favorite games. So yes, because I am that old. But yeah, the original one, there was like stairs or something here, and there was like a light. And anyway, I always loved that, but it was a perspective drawing. So like if you can go back and find that, it was a really cool perspective where they had just done these really basic lines, and that's how you get the size of your windows. That's how you get the size of your walls, everything. This is also how you can get shadows. So things like that, I try to hit in drawing rather than in my painting classes, because painting, it's kind of a whole other animal. I mean, essentially you're drawing with a paintbrush. I mean, so drawing is your most basic, and then everything kind of stems from there. So painting, I don't really cover as much. Now, speaking of what I'm going to cover, I do want to talk about how frequently I'm going to do this. So my original thought is to just start out twice per week. And I'll do 2 different things. So I might do a drawing class for one of them and a painting class for the other. Your year of birth. Ah, cool. Okay. All right. Well, all right. So that makes me feel like a little less old, I suppose, because 86 was not too. Or wait, was it 86 or 88? 86. Yeah. Yeah. That's not too far. That's only 8 years. Yeah. 8 years away from when I was born. It's not bad. So I'm thinking twice a week. I want to try to do my streams at different times of the day so that I can catch people in other countries. So for example, I might, like for example, Pa, what would be a good time for you to watch your stream in your time? I'm going to take a drink of my wine. By the way, this wine, bonus brownie points if anybody can guess who's behind the name here. This wine is called Crush. It's a red blend, and it is from the vineyard, the Dreaming Tree. So who knows who that is? Oh man, Sokoban was from 82. Well, I don't think I played it until, I feel like the first time I played Sokoban, I was like 10. So I didn't probably play it until like 88. So who knows? Maybe it had been updated by then. I just assumed that it was the original. All right, so Pa, when you get a chance, oh, well, you don't have to be a wine connoisseur. So actually you have to know music. So the name of the wine is Crush. The name of the vineyard is Dreaming Tree. And when I first saw it, well, I first saw Dreaming Tree and I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. That's the name of an album. And then I saw the name of the wine and I said, are you freaking kidding me? It is. So I'm giving you a big hint, but it was, and the person whose album it is, or the person, the name of the band is the person. And this was his venture. It's an okay wine. I'm not going to say it's like the best. I'm a big red wine snob, so it's not like the best red wine I've ever had, but it's pretty good. It's all right. All right. So Pa, when you weigh in, I want to know like what times work best for you because I think you mentioned earlier being what like about 6 or 7 hours ahead. I think I'm on Eastern Standard Time. I'm in Florida, so I don't know. But what I was going to try to do is do one of my streams earlier in the day. Right now I have the flexibility to do that, so I was going to do a stream earlier in the day. Maybe that will be my drawing stream. Okay, in my time, probably like 8 p.m. Um, okay, okay. Well, that's fair. Okay, cool. All right. Well, either way, I do want to do one earlier in the day, and then I want to do one in like the evening. Uh, Probably good with most times at the moment. Okay, cool. All right. Well, um, so I will split it up. I'll do one drawing and one painting, or one drawing and one like a watercolor or acrylic like, per week. And then we'll see how it goes. And if my viewership goes up and it looks really great, that it's going well, then I may up that to more times per week. But I want to start out with two. Okay, now each class is about 2 hours. Now with chatting and pausing for chat, it might take a little bit longer, but in my face-to-face classes, it usually took about 2 hours, even with like kids getting up and taking bathroom breaks and things like that. I also like to do a little bit of stretching in the middle. I'm a personal trainer as well. I know she does it all. Um, but I like to do a little bit of stretching in the middle. So I might do like some little like seated cow, something like that. Just to kind of get the body flowing and then get back to whatever the lesson is. The end of the lesson, I can't do it with you guys, although I will encourage you to participate via chat talking about your own work. But if you work with me the entire time, I do a critique at the end. This is something important that we do in art that you don't really see in too many other like academic areas, I guess. Okay. I feel, and what I've noticed from my students is that by doing a critique at the end, I have everybody say one thing that they feel is working well in their painting or drawing, and then I want them to list one thing that they feel could use work. And it's not necessarily what you like or don't like, but what you think is actually working well, what's effective, and what's not effective. Maybe something you could do differently next time. This is important because in the art world, we are very used to not only having to talk about our own work, but so we have to talk about ourselves a lot, which is hard for a lot of people. But in the art world, we kind of get used to it because that's, if you major in art, you have to do that every class. But also getting feedback and critique, and understanding the difference between criticism and feedback, because that's something that's very hard. And I know there are a lot of people out there that their self-esteem can really be impacted by getting feedback from someone. If someone says, hey, you talk too much, can you imagine that? I've probably heard that. Yes. So by the way, somebody said I talk too much. That's criticism, not feedback, because that's on my person rather than on something I'm doing. But either way, the idea is that in a painting or a drawing, if you can get used to doing it in that way, then then you can get used to hearing it in regular life, and it gets easier. And let me tell you, it's not about having thick skin. It's about being able to take the feedback and either using it or not using it, but understanding that ultimately that is that other person's problem and you don't have to own that. There are plenty of pieces of artwork that I have liked it exactly how it was. I didn't think that it needed to be worked anymore. And even my teacher or maybe somebody else said, oh, I think you could do this or this to improve it. And I would say, okay. And then continue to do exactly what I was doing because I felt confident in my techniques, in my methods. So it's a really important lesson. So I encourage everyone to do it. I will do it with my own work for you guys, but I encourage you to do it with your own as well. And like I said, maybe even share your thoughts, even though we won't be able to see it, share it with the group. So there you go. And I need to figure out on my website is not based as a blog, but I need to figure out how to get it so that people can post pictures of their stuff, because I think that would be pretty cool if maybe eventually people can take pictures of their work and post it there. Okay. Last thing I want to talk about. Does anybody have any questions so far? Let me ask that again. Take a breathing pause. That's another thing I'll sometimes do is breathing techniques. I also teach mindfulness workshops, so that's something else that I really enjoy is meditation and mindfulness. Get some water in here. All wine, no water. A Discord server. Well, oh, you can do that on Discord. You can submit work there. That would be cool. I don't know how to do that, but I will research that and figure that out because, yeah, that would be fantastic if people could submit their work, especially if it could be done in any kind of real time. I've tried to figure out Discord for other streams and have not been able to figure it out. So I'm either doing something wrong or it might not be, maybe the software doesn't work well on my system. I don't know. But I will check that out. Thank you, Philip. I appreciate that. All right. So last thing that I want to talk about are my classroom rules. Now, this is a little bit, I don't know. I mean, benign, I guess is the right word, because I can't see you guys, so I don't know if you're actually following the rules or not, but it is an honor system. So there's only 3 of them. The number 1 rule, and it is number 1 for a reason, is clean workspace. It's so important. I have ruined so many paintings in the past before I really firmly grasped this rule where, like, I remember one time I was working on a 3D piece that had sawdust involved, and I had an oil painting, and oil can take up to a week to dry. And I was working on them close together. I did not clean up the sawdust right away. I figured, well, I'll get to it later. I had worked for like 15 hours on this one painting, and somebody opened a door somewhere and there was a draft and sawdust went all over my painting, and I was able to finally clean it off, but it was very, very, very time consuming. So it is a lesson. If you have paper towels, that's something I didn't mention. Sorry, guys. With painting, now with drawing, you don't have to worry about it. With painting, both watercolor and acrylic, you will need paper towels or a towel of some kind because you'll have to clean your brush as you go. Oh yes, Philip, it was horrible. I cried a lot. It was due the next day too, so it was not fun. But yes, so we will need paper towels, or like I said, you can use a towel, and I have in the effort of being nice to the environment, I have really tried to start using regular towels rather than paper towels, so they can just be washed. Acrylic paint, once it dries, whether it's on your clothes or whatever, it's relatively permanent. Now, if you have it on a surface somewhere, it may be able to be scraped off. Like if it was a plate or something like that, you can scrape it off. Even when it dries on these, you have to like really work at it to get it dry. And in fact, you can see, I don't know if you guys can see like the colors and how it's stained over time. Let me see if I have any more. And here's another one where it's stained. So, it definitely, even if you get it off, it stains. So even though it's water soluble, it's permanent when it dries. Okay, there is a way to get little bits off. You can use acetone, which is usually a nail polish remover. and I use like little Q-tips and just very, very gently dab at the area where the acrylic paint is. But in general, you want to wear some kind of apron or a messy shirt you don't care about or whatever, because if it gets on your clothes, that piece of clothing is ruined. So that's something to keep in mind. But clean workspace, clean as you go. So I will frequently, get up and get fresh water, things like that, like as the painting classes go. Okay. Second rule, and this is more for my ADHD students, but don't rush. So take your time. If you have to draw a horizon line, don't just go like that. Sometimes like that actually can help you get a straighter line because you're not going so slow. But don't go fast about it, because that's what's going to you'll end up getting more happy accidents than you want. Let's just say that. So don't rush. Take your time. Take a deep breath if you feel like you're feeling rushed. Especially for my ADHD kids, I have something that's very similar to that. So I understand that the pressure to feel like you have to go quickly. What I do is, and I will probably frequently do this maybe halfway through our sessions, is I do some type of breathing exercise. There's butterfly breathing where you like that, when you blow out your hands. There's a couple other breathing techniques that are good. So if you have to do that to slow yourself down, please do, but don't rush. So number 1, clean workspace. Number 2, don't rush. Number 3, and this is so important, when we were talking about the critique, I kind of touched on it, but there's no bad-mouthing the art. No bad-mouthing other people's art, which you probably won't be able to see unless I can figure out the Discord thing. But 100% no bad-mouthing your own art. It's detrimental to your mental health. Let's just say that. Speak positively about your work, because even when you say that there's something that you could do to improve the work, that's still a positive way to say it. It's not saying, oh, my line work is terrible, or my trees are crappy looking trees or something like that. It's, first of all, that's not very constructive. Or even saying I can't draw, or I'm a terrible artist. That's not helping anyone. All it's doing is confirming in your mind something that's just not true, because anyone can do art. Like I said, it's just a skill you don't have yet, or one that you just need to improve. So it's not helpful. That's why it's my number 3 rule. No bad-mouthing the art, no bad-mouthing the artist. And that's it. So number 1, clean workspace. Number 2, don't rush. And number 3, no bad-mouthing the art or the artist, including yourself. So that is all I have. If there are no questions, I did promise, I don't know if he's on the chat, but there was somebody who had whispered to me last night, and I promised him that I would give my masala chai recipe, because as we all know from John's streams, chai tea is a favorite, and I make my own on the stovetop. So are there any questions about the art? I know, right? I'm about to give a big secret away. It's funny because John said something about how maybe I needed to get the fancy chai machine, but man, there's nothing like stovetop chai. It's the best. Okay, so here's the secret. The secret to it is brown sugar. I'm not lying. That's what makes it so good. Oh, the first class. Okay, thank you. Haha. Haha. You have to wait for the chai. Okay, let's see. I will do the first class Thursday. How about that? So the 2nd. So I will do, right? Because today's the 31st, yeah. So I will do the first class on Thursday. I don't know what time yet, but I will do, I'll start with a drawing class because that's something that can be done with tools you probably already have if you have a pencil and printer paper. Again, if you do want to get fancy pencils, there are other drawing sets out there. Like I said, this has lead, graphite, charcoal, and chalk. So that's, I do recommend getting that if you are serious about learning to draw, because it's good to learn all the different tools that you would use. You can use your finger instead of a spreader, or like a paper towel or something, or a piece of paper. So even the spreader and everything you don't really need, but it's nice to have. Anyway, so I'll probably do a drawing class this Thursday. And like I said, I don't know the time yet, but I'll make sure that that's on my offline page when I do figure out the time. So good question, Aunt Debbie. Well, see, now I'm starting to sound more Chicago. Oh my gosh. It's because I'm talking about my Aunt Debbie. Okay, so masala chai. So first of all, I just want to say chai means tea. So when people say chai tea, you're saying tea tea. Tea tea. So chai is tea, and that's why a lot of people say, oh, I don't like chai, because maybe they've had chai in the past and they probably just had black tea. I mean, it is entirely possible. And the thing is that's not for everyone. Black tea with milk, I don't like black tea with milk. I do like black tea by itself, but adding the milk, I don't know, it just adds like this other layer that I'm not used to. In this country, hot tea is typically not drank with milk. So, okay. However, the brown sugar is the key, because once you add that, then it tastes more like kind of a tea version of hot cocoa. It's really good. So on the stove, you get like a pot, you will always want 2 parts water to 1 part milk. So no matter how much you're making, 2 parts water to 1 part milk. 1 cup of milk, 1 cup of water, half a cup of milk is a single serving. So 1 cup of water, half a cup of milk. Then you can add whatever spices you want. I actually change it up. So I like to put in a stick of cinnamon. I'll smash up some allspice, some whole allspice. Ginger, like slice off a couple of coins of ginger. It's really good. Turmeric, which I think is really good for digestion. So I always put like kind of a dash of that in there. Let's see what else is good. Cardamom seeds, and you can use cardamom seeds are harder to find, but you can use the ground cardamom. But if you get the seeds, you have to crush them before you put them in. You just put everything in there. I'm trying to think fennel is good. What else? Cloves. Oh man, cloves make it so good. Even if you just put like cloves and cinnamon in there, delicious. Okay, so you put all of this on the stove, you bring it to a boil, and you need to keep stirring frequently, especially if you use whole milk, because it will stick to the bottom. So you've got your milk mixture and your spices going. You bring it to a boil. Then you add your black tea. So it's 1 tablespoon of black tea per serving. So again, 1 cup of water, half a cup of milk. So 1.5 cups of liquid is a serving. So you add your black tea. All right, 1 tablespoon of black tea. You let that boil for 5 minutes, and that's key because a lot of people don't realize black tea is sturdier variety. Green tea and white tea need to be at a lower temperature, but black tea actually needs to be either at boiling or just below boiling. Like it needs to be pretty hot to open up the tea, and you have to boil it longer. Green tea and white tea is only like 3 minutes, I think, of steeping time, whereas black tea is a full 5 minutes. So that's key. So you go 5 minutes, you turn off the stove, and then you put a tablespoon of brown sugar in there. So I always do equal parts brown sugar and tea. So however much tea you put in, put the same amount of brown sugar. Mix everything up. You pour it through one of those sifter things. Or I forget what they're called at the moment, but you just put that over your cup and pour everything through because, of course, you have all of the tea and everything. I use loose tea. You can use tea bags. And if you use tea bags, then you just need to have 1 tea bag is 1 serving. But I sometimes will tear them open and put the tea in there because loose tea is actually really good. Then, and that's it. And diffuser, thank you. Thank you, Aunt Debbie. um, so yeah, you use a diffuser, and it is so good. And it depends on what spices you use. Like I said, you can't go wrong with like cloves and cinnamon. That is like a really good combination right there. But like I said, cardamom, fennel, ginger, turmeric. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce that, so hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. Um, yeah. So that is a delicious chai. And let me tell you, I've heard at least on 4 different occasions, 4 different people say, I don't like chai. And then they've had mine, and now they're believers, they're true believers. So I am confident that you would like that recipe. So that's my chai recipe. It's not fancy. You don't get the cool foam on top or anything like that, but it is traditional chai. I don't know how traditional the brown sugar is, but that's what makes it amazing. So there you go, my chai recipe. And there is a really, really good chance that I will be having chai in many of my classes because unlike John, it does not have to be a special occasion for me to drink chai. I love, love, love it. So it does keep me up though. The chai I had last night, I was up till 4 in the morning, so that was fun. Okay, so any other questions? It is 9:25 my time, so I am sure that some of my East Coasters want to go out and party. So just be safe and be careful. I guess those are kind of the same thing. But have a great time. And there you go. Happy New Year.